I found my personal desire to tell this story, like to show up at rehearsal every night and live in these given circumstances, was that I realized Madeline needed a memorial, right, of Adam's life, some sort of vessel. And that it occurred to me, it's just such a human need, that we need the containers that hold the stories of our lives in order to feel like we have meaning.
Right.
Which is interesting now too, right? In the kind of the grief of a loss of a show. So how have you grieved through opening and closing Lockerbie in one?
Oh my goodness. Like, meeting it at different times, I think, is a good way to describe it. It's actually been fascinating to me, because I'm first off so grateful that the show saw an audience.
Mm-hmm.
What a gift, what a unique silver lining that we had 2 preview audiences and were able to tweak it and get it to a point that it really landed that opening night.
Yeah.
So what a beautiful gift to have. So when the news came, my initial reaction, what surprised me and shocked me in a way, was I was really angry. I got angry fast. And I found that I was grasping at who to blame, what to blame, and just being angry and throwing at whatever I could without it being at people. Now every once in a while I feel a little sad. More I feel grateful and gratitude for everything that it was. With a little bit of moments of anger that some of my colleagues and more people in the community and the theater community here in Seattle didn't get to see the show. And I think that to me just feels like the duality of COVID that we live in, of, this one minute I'm great and I'm happy and things are wonderful, and this next minute I want to punch the wall, and this next minute I just want to cry in a ball.
Yeah.
And to me, the irony isn't lost on me that we did a show that heavily dealt with grief and going through a process like that. So for you to open and close might have come as more of a shock, but what was it like to have the show cut short, and what has your grieving process been like?
It was devastating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it was strange, because I did grapple with this show as an actor. And a lot of that is just like a push me, pull me of wanting to tell the story, but not wanting to go there, but wanting to tell the story, but not wanting, right? And then the audience arrived, and it was like, oh yeah, that's why. Yeah, I want to do this. And so that hurt. It was devastating, to kind of feel like you just cracked it, and then for it to end. And I remember standing in the theater after the photo shoot with you. It was dark, and it was just me and you, Kristie, and Jordan, our set designer, and Jess, our costume designer, just looking at this dark, empty stage with our set on it. Mm-hmm. And Adam was still so much the show was in my bones. Adam was in my bones and my body. And on the set, I built little imaginary altars to different kind of members of our community who had recently suffered some loss. So there was a lot that I felt the need. Interesting that the show also deals with this. I needed some sort of ritual. I needed some cleansing to kind of put the show to bed. And I stood there and I took it in and took some breaths, and that's really all I got.
And I'm curious to know, what is it that you were most looking forward to sharing with the audience? Or maybe what were some questions you wanted the audience to have as they left?
And I think my wish in this show was that people would leave and, you know, tell their children and their wives and their husbands and their partners that they love them, right? That they text their moms and dads at the end of the show. This show is like all Greek tragedies. It's kind of a container for people to have some space in which to pour their grief, right? To have it be held for 85 minutes. So Kristie, what about you? What were you most excited to share with an audience?
The humanness of it. You know, to borrow a phrase that my colleague Andrew Koopman used this week, the fact that the world is still turning and some things don't change. So sharing the aspect of this play that this was a real event. This really happened. And when we first started in the process and now to think about it, it feels forever ago, but it was just, 4 months ago that we started in rehearsals.
Wow. To
know that around that time, history was beginning to repeat itself with the bombings in Iran, and that they retaliated by blowing up an airplane that was carrying students who were studying abroad, which is an important part of Madeline's story. So for me, for the audience, it's kind of that, yes, the human side of grief, and yes, all the beautiful things that you said, like who do you love, who do you hold, how can you hold them more? And it's the fact that we are a human family. We have a need and care to take care of each other, and what do we do to take action? What kind of change can we do? The Women of Lockerbie took action by wanting to wash the clothes. And what is the action that we can take? However small and simple it may appear to us, it may have a rippling effect on the world around us.
And I think that's quite important, is that in what you just said too, the small and simple, like the action of the play is something we consider pretty mundane, right? Doing the laundry, less mundane because it's the clothes of the victims, but that it is a very human, very small and domestic act of love that is profoundly important, which is kind of, something to really consider, especially now in these times when we're quarantined with our families and loved ones, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The offerings, right?
Right. Yeah, the ones we make, and not and taking the ones we take, right? Even if they
and knowing we always and we always have a choice about it. You know, Bill says leave it up to the families to choose if they want it or they don't.
Yeah.
You know, offering, receiving, choosing. I think those are really big themes, universal themes that are really throughout this play, for sure.